Nobody talks about what really happened that night at Windsor Castle. The official record says nothing. The palace staff were told to stay quiet. Even the guard himself never spoke a word about it publicly. But people who were there, the ones who stood in that cold corridor and watched it unfold, they remember every second. It was the kind of night that looked peaceful from the outside. The sky above Windsor was dark and still. No wind, no noise, just the soft yellow glow of the upper windows and the distant crunch of footsteps on the gravel path below. Inside, the castle had already settled into its evening routine. Doors had been closed. Lights had been dimmed. The long stone corridors that stretched through the residential wing had gone quiet, the way they always did after 9 o'clock, and in one small room near the end of the east corridor, a little girl was finally asleep. Charlotte had fought it the way children do. She had asked for water twice. She had called out once, saying she heard something. But by 9:30, her breathing had slowed. Her small hand had loosened around the edge of her blanket, and the room had gone still. Her nanny, a composed woman named Mrs. Alderton, had eased the door shut with both hands, careful, quiet, deliberate. She had stood outside for a moment just to listen. Nothing, only silence, she allowed herself. One small exhale of relief. That was when the footsteps started at the far end of the corridor. They were measured and unhurried at first. The sound of someone who belonged there, someone who walked these halls with authority. Mrs. Alderton turned and looked toward the sound. The corridor was long and lit only by the low wall sconces that stayed on through the night. A figure was approaching. She recognized the posture immediately. The straight back, the deliberate walk, the quiet confidence that came with decades of royal life. It was the Queen, not an aide, not a lady-in-waiting. The Queen herself, moving alone down the corridor toward Charlotte's room. Mrs. Alderton stood straighter. Her heart shifted into something between reverence and sudden anxiety. She had no reason to stop her. She had no authority to stop her. The Queen walked where she wished, inside these walls. That had always been true. But Charlotte was asleep. The room was silent. The night had just settled, and anyone who had spent time around young children knew what one unexpected knock, one opening door, one shift in light or sound could do to a child who had only just drifted off. Mrs. Alderton pressed her lips together. She said nothing. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is a good time. Stories like this one don't come around often. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss one. The Queen was perhaps 20 feet away now. Her expression was unreadable, the way it often was in private moments, not cold, but contained. Whatever had brought her to this corridor at this hour, she had not announced it to anyone. Then, from the alcove just beside Charlotte's door, something moved. A shadow shifted. A figure stepped forward into the low light. It was the night guard. He was young, perhaps 26, perhaps 27. New to this post, assigned to the residential wing only 3 weeks earlier. He wore his uniform cleanly, stood with quiet discipline, and had, until this moment, done nothing more notable than stand. Very still for very long hours. But now he stepped forward and he raised one hand. Not a weapon, not an alarm. Just a hand, open-palmed, steady. Directed gently but unmistakably toward the approaching Queen. The corridor went absolutely silent. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Because what had just happened was something that, in the history of royal protocol, almost never happened at all. A guard had just told the Queen to stop. Asterisk, asterisk, for a moment. The Queen simply looked at him, not with anger, not with surprise, exactly, but with something sharper, a focused, measuring stillness that those who knew her described as far more unnerving than any raised voice could ever be. The guard did not move his hand. He did not step back. His arm stayed exactly where it was, extended, open-palmed. Steady, and his eyes stayed fixed, respectfully, just below her gaze, the way he had been trained, direct enough to communicate, careful enough not to overstep to anyone watching. It looked almost unreal. The corridor was empty except for the three of them, the queen, the nanny, and the young guard standing between them like a single quiet wall. The sconce light caught the edge of his uniform. The old stone floor reflected nothing. Somewhere far below in the castle, a clock ticked. Mrs. Alderton had not moved a muscle. She stood with her back straight and her hands folded in front of her, her face very carefully blank. Inside, her thoughts were moving fast. She knew the protocol. Everyone in the household knew it. The queen had authority over every room, every corridor, every door inside these walls. No staff member, no matter their title, could restrict her movement. It simply was not done. And yet, there was the guard. Hand raised, still waiting. The queen's eyes moved from his hand to his face. She studied him for a long moment. Then, in a voice that was quiet and precise, she said 3 words: "Stand down, please." It was not a shout. It was barely even firm. But in the silence of that corridor, it landed with the full weight of what she was, who she was, and what that uniform meant when it stood in her presence. The guard took one breath, then he spoke. His voice was low, measured, almost apologetic in tone, but absolutely unwavering in content. "Ma'am," he said, "the child has just gone to sleep." Another silence. Mrs. Alderton felt something tighten in her chest. She could not tell if it was fear or something else. Some old, buried instinct that recognized a moment before the mind could properly name it. The guard continued. He did not rush. He did not stammer. "She's been unsettled for 3 nights running. Mrs. Alderton has only just got her down. The room is directly behind this door." He paused. "I would ask, with great respect, that we allow her 5 minutes to settle fully before entry. After that, I will step aside immediately." He lowered his hand, but he did not move from the door. The queen looked at him for what felt, to everyone present, like a very long time. Her expression had not changed. Nothing about her posture had shifted. She stood in the corridor of her own home, in her own castle, before a guard she had seen perhaps twice before. And she let the silence sit between them like a question with no obvious answer. Mrs. Alderton found herself holding her breath without meaning to. She had worked in royal households for 11 years. She had seen difficult moments, awkward ones, tense ones. She had seen powerful people be reminded of small things. But she had never seen anything quite like this, because what the guard had done was not a refusal. Not exactly. It was something more precise and somehow more remarkable than that. He had made a choice. He had looked at the woman in front of him. Not just a woman. But the queen and he had decided, quietly and without drama, that a sleeping child's rest was worth the risk of everything that choice might cost him. His rank, his post, perhaps his entire career. And he had done it anyway. The queen's gaze moved, just briefly, to the door, then back to the guard, and something in her face, just the faintest thing, barely visible in the low corridor light, seemed to shift. Asterisk, asterisk, she took a step back. Not a retreat, not a withdrawal. Just one small, deliberate step, the kind that comes from a decision already made. A decision made somewhere private and quiet. Inside a person before anyone else can see it. The queen clasped her hands in front of her and looked once more at the guard. Her voice, when she spoke, was so low that Mrs. Alderton almost didn't catch it. 5 minutes, she said. That was all. She did not explain why she had come. She did not acknowledge that anything unusual had happened. She simply turned with the same quiet authority with which she had arrived, and walked back toward the end of the corridor, Her footsteps faded slowly. Then the corridor was silent. Again, Mrs. Alderton let out a breath so long and so slow that it made her dizzy. She pressed one hand against the cool stone wall beside her and stared at the guard. He had not moved. He was standing precisely where he had been, back straight, hands now at his sides, eyes forward. As if nothing had happened. As if he were simply doing his job. "Do you know what you just did?" She whispered. He didn't look at her, but the faintest shadow of something, not quite a smile, not quite fear, crossed his face. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly. She shook her head, not in disapproval, in something closer to disbelief. She had seen bold things in her years of service. She had watched junior staff stumble and recover, had witnessed the odd moment of accidental impertinence that left everyone in the room holding their breath. But this had been none of that. This had been deliberate, considered the kind of boldness that comes not from recklessness, but from something far rarer. A clear sense of what matters most in a given moment, held firmly even when the cost is uncertain. The guard's name was James Okafor. He had joined the household division at 22, transferred to the residential protection unit 3 weeks before this night, and had been assigned the East Corridor post on rotation. He was not famous. He had no particular record of distinction. He was, by every official measure, simply a young man doing a job he had trained hard for and taken seriously. But James Okafor had grown up as the second of 5 children. He knew what it meant to guard someone's sleep. He had spent years watching his mother press a finger to her lips in the hallway. Years of knowing that the quiet of one small room could hold the rest of the whole house together, that it was worth protecting even at some cost to yourself. He had not stopped to calculate that when he raised his hand. It had come from somewhere older than calculation. The 5 minutes passed. Mrs. Alderton counted them in silence, watching the door, listening for any sound from inside. Nothing. Charlotte had not stirred. Whatever dreams she was moving through, they were undisturbed and deep. When the 5 minutes were up, she looked at James. He gave a single, small nod and stepped aside. And 60 seconds later, the footsteps returned from the end of the corridor. The Queen came back. She walked at the same measured pace, her expression still composed, her eyes fixed ahead. She reached the door. She placed one hand on the handle. Then she paused. She looked at James, one long, full look, the kind that takes in a person rather than just acknowledging them. Then she opened the door, quietly and carefully, and stepped inside. Mrs. Alderton stood in the corridor, her heart still somewhere between her chest and her throat. She did not know what the Queen was doing in that room. She did not know what had brought her down that corridor at that hour, alone, without announcement. She did not know what had shifted in the Queen's expression in those 5 minutes of waiting. But she knew one thing. Whatever happened next, whatever came of this night, this moment, this impossible quiet standoff in a stone corridor, James Okafor had changed something. She could feel it in the air. She just couldn't say yet what it was. Asterisk, the room was very small by castle standards. A narrow bed with a pale blue cover. A lamp with a soft yellow shade turned down low. A wooden chair beside the bed, angled slightly inward, the way it had been left when someone last sat there watching over the child who slept in it. Charlotte was on her side. One arm stretched out across the pillow, her dark hair fanned out around her face. Her lips were slightly parted. Her breathing was slow and even. She had no idea anyone had entered. The Queen stood at the threshold for a long moment. The door barely opened, letting her eyes adjust to the low light. Then she moved inside to careful steps. 3 and stopped near the foot of the bed. She stood very still. Later, Mrs. Alderton would be asked, gently, by one of the senior household staff if she knew what the Queen had done in that room. Mrs. Alderton would say she didn't know for certain. She had not gone inside. She had remained in the corridor, but she had watched the door, and the door had not opened again for 17 minutes. 17 minutes of quiet. 17 minutes while the corridor stayed empty and the castle breathed around them. 17 minutes while James stood at his post, eyes forward, giving nothing away. What happens in 17 minutes? Standing alone over a sleeping child in the small hours of a winter night. There is no official answer. There is no record, but people who have lost someone who have stood in rooms where the silence feels both full and fragile. They might understand it without needing an explanation. Charlotte had been unwell that week. Nothing serious, nothing alarming, but enough. A fever that came and went. Nights that had been broken and restless. Her parents had been concerned in the way parents always are, attentively, quietly, trying not to show it too plainly. And the Queen, who was her grandmother, had been watching. From a distance, as was her way. She had not made a fuss. She had not insisted on being given reports or updates. She had simply watched, the way she always did, from somewhere behind her composure. Through the contained expression that people often mistook for detachment. But detachment and restraint are not the same thing. And grandmothers, even queens, even women who have spent a lifetime learning to hold themselves steady in front of the world, they still feel the pull of a small room where someone they love is sleeping. They still come down. Corridors late at night they still stop at the foot of a bed and simply look. When the Queen came out of the room, she pulled the door shut with the same care she had used going in. The click of the latch was barely audible. She straightened. She did not look flushed or moved or anything other than what she always was: composed, present, still. But she paused once more beside James. He was looking straight ahead, posture perfect, giving her nothing to react to. Just a guard at his post. Just a young man doing his job. The Queen tilted her head slightly. "What is your name?" she asked. "Okafor, ma'am." "James Okafor." She nodded. The way she nodded. When she was cataloging something, filing it away in that precise and extraordinary memory that people who worked with her for decades described with a kind of quiet. "Ah, Okafor," she repeated. Then she walked away. James did not move. He did not exhale dramatically. He did not look at Mrs. Alderton, who was standing 10 feet away, watching the whole thing with wide eyes and a very carefully closed mouth. He simply stood. But later, hours later, when the shift had ended and he was sitting alone in the staff room with a mug of tea going cold in his hands, he allowed himself one thought. She had not reported him. She had not summoned his commanding officer. No one had come to find him. No quiet word had been delivered through a senior aide. Nothing. Just his name, said once in a corridor by the Queen. He wasn't sure yet what that meant, but he was starting to wonder. **** James slept badly. Not because of guilt. He was clear-eyed about what he had done and why. But the mind doesn't always cooperate with clarity. And so he lay awake in the gray early hours before his alarm, turning the night over in his thoughts the way you turn something in your hands when you're not sure if it's valuable or broken. He had raised his hand to the Queen, not in threat, not in anything other than respectful request, but he had stopped her. He had made her wait. He had, in the language of protocol, committed an act that had no real precedent in his training manual and no neat answer in any handbook he had ever read. His commanding officer was a steady, no-nonsense man named Colonel Hargreaves, who had been in the household division for over 30 years. James had met him twice. Both times, Hargreaves had looked at him in that precise way of experienced senior officers measuring. Patient, giving nothing away. James was due on shift at 7. He arrived at 6:45. The residential wing was quiet in the early morning. The staff who had been on through the night were finishing up. The ones coming on were still arriving in ones and twos, nodding at each other, wrapping hands around cups of tea. The castle smelled like cold stone and warm bread from somewhere below. James took his post. He checked his watch. He stood still. At 8:15, one of the senior aides appeared at the end of the corridor. James felt his jaw tighten, just slightly. The aide was a tall man named Mr. Forsyth, who had been with the household for 12 years and who carried the particular composure of someone who had seen everything and was surprised by nothing. He walked without hurry toward James, stopped in front of him, and looked at him for a moment without speaking. James met his gaze. "Colonel Hargreaves would like a word," Forsyth said. His tone told James nothing. It was the same tone Forsyth used for everything balanced, neutral, entirely impossible to read. "Of course," James said. He followed Forsyth through 2 corridors and down a staircase to a small office near the staff quarters. The door was already open. Colonel Hargreaves was standing behind his desk, not sitting. That, James noted, was either a good sign or a bad one. He wasn't sure which. "Close the door," Hargreaves said. James closed it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Hargreaves looked at him with that measuring expression. James stood straight, hands at his sides, and waited. "Last night," Hargreaves said. "Yes, sir. Had a full account from Mrs. Alderton." Paused. "And a brief word this morning from the senior aide to Her Majesty." James said nothing. His breathing stayed even. "Barely. You stopped her." "I asked her to wait, sir. 5 minutes. Until the child was fully settled." Hargreaves looked at him. The silence stretched. "You understand," he said finally, "that there is no protocol for what you did?" "I do, sir." "There is no rule that permits it. No standing order. No precedent I am aware of." "I understand." Another pause. Hargreaves picked up a single sheet of paper from his desk and looked at it. Then he set it down again without saying what was on it. "Her Majesty did not file a complaint," he said. James felt something loosen very slightly, somewhere behind his ribs. "She did not request a review. She did not ask for your reassignment." Hargreaves folded his hands. "What she did do, and I want to be precise about this, was ask through the senior aide that your name be noted." "He let that land?" "Noted for what, sir?" James asked carefully. Hargreaves looked at him for a long moment. "That," he said, "is what we are going to find out." James walked out of the office 10 minutes later into a corridor that looked exactly as it always had: stone floors, low light, the distant sounds of the castle waking up around him. But something had changed. He could feel it. He just didn't know yet how it would unfold. 3 weeks passed. James went back to his routine. Shifts, corridors, the steady discipline of standing still for long hours while the world moved around him. He said nothing about the night to his colleagues, not because he was hiding it, but because it had felt, from the beginning, like something that belonged to the quiet, something that would be made smaller by being put into words. Mrs. Alderton saw him once, near the end of the 2nd week. She was carrying a small jacket that had been left on one of the corridor benches. She stopped when she saw him, looked at him with those careful eyes of hers, and gave him one small, deliberate nod. He nodded back. That was all. It was enough. On the 22nd day after that night, James was called not to Hargreaves' office this time, but to a different room entirely. A larger one, in a part of the residential wing he had only been to once before. During his initial orientation tour, he was met by Forsyth, who led him without explanation through a door and into a room that was warm and quiet and furnished with a kind of simple, lived-in comfort that distinguished private royal spaces from the formal ones. Books on shelves, a pair of reading glasses on a side table, a vase of pale flowers near the window. The Queen was sitting in a chair near the window. She looked up when James entered. She was not in formal dress. She looked, in that moment, simply like an older woman sitting in a room with afternoon light coming through the glass. "Sit down," she said. James sat. She looked at him for a moment with that direct, cataloging gaze he remembered from the corridor. "My granddaughter slept well that night," she said. "And the nights after." "I'm glad, ma'am. Mrs. Alderton told me she hadn't slept properly for 6 days before." She paused. "I didn't know that when I walked down that corridor. I knew she had been unwell. I didn't know what the nights had been." James said nothing. He waited. "I came to see her the way I sometimes do," the Queen continued. "Late, when the house is quiet and nobody is watching, and I am simply a grandmother who wants to stand in a room and look at a child who has been ill." She said it plainly, without apology, without softening it. "I have done it many times. Usually, no one is in the way." A very faint pause. "You were in the way," she said. Double quotes, "Yes, ma'am. And you chose to stay there." "I did." She was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, the grounds were pale and still. Winter was holding on past its welcome, the way it sometimes did. "Do you know what I thought?" she asked, "when you raised your hand?" He shook his head. "I thought, here is someone who understands something." She folded her hands in her lap. "Not protocol. Not rules. Something older than that." She looked at him carefully. "The difference between authority and responsibility. You had the second. You used it." In spite of the first, James felt the weight of the room settle around him. "Most people," she said, "would have stepped aside, and I would have thought no less of them for it. It is the reasonable thing, the safe thing." She tilted her head slightly. "But you didn't." "No, ma'am." "Why not?" He thought about his answer before he gave it. He thought about the corridor, about Charlotte's door and the thin sound of her breathing he had been listening to for hours before the footsteps came, about his mother's hallway and a finger pressed to her lips and all the years of knowing without being told what a sleeping child's rest is worth. "Because someone had to," he said. The Queen looked at him. Then something in her expression, quiet, private, only there for a second, shifted into something that was not quite a smile, but was something close to it, something that had warmth in it. "Yes," she said simply. "Someone had to." She told him then what having his name noted had meant. A commendation quietly filed, with a recommendation for accelerated consideration in his unit. Not a ceremony. Not a public thing. Just the right people knowing, in the right way. About the night a young guard chose a child's sleep over his own certainty. James walked out into the winter afternoon. The castle was solid around him. The gravel path was hard under his feet. The sky above Windsor was pale and wide and going slowly dark at the edges. He thought about Charlotte, somewhere inside those walls, probably awake now, probably running somewhere, laughing, the way children do when they've had enough rest. And the world is once again a safe and ordinary place. He thought about the Queen, sitting in her chair by the window, with her reading glasses on the side table and her simple, extraordinary ability to recognize the moment when someone had done the right thing. And he thought about the hand he had raised in the corridor, that single, quiet, open-palmed gesture in the dim light, and how it had held the weight of everything that mattered. Not always loudly, not always safely, but held. That is the thing about the right moments. They don't always announce themselves. They arrive in corridors, in quiet, in the space between one footstep and the next, and all they ask is whether you will rise to meet them. James O'Cofer did. And somewhere inside Windsor Castle, a little girl slept. End.